Hello and welcome to Tools in the Shed, a podcast powered by CarsGuide, ready to rip into car stuff that has caught our eye this week. I'm CarsGuide Deputy Editor James, and with me is staff journalist Tom.
Yo.
And long-time contributor Steve.
Greetings.
This week, we're digging into performance SUVs moving into the mainstream. We'll look at some fresh metal in the CarsGuide garage, and we'll catch up with the Lord of the Silicon Valley Rings in this week's MuskWatch. So stay with us. But first, we've had some feedback from last week. And last week, our main topic of conversation was the Maxus or LDV concept pickup or ute, whatever you want to call it. And we had a lot of feedback, positive, negative, and somewhere in between. But David Bertie Burt said that he thinks the Maxus concept says the Chinese can produce volume, but not design and create yet. It's that early stage kind of phase, he believes. You style it, design it, and we'll adopt it and adapt it, is what Bertie says. Front end has elements of Triton, Ranger, and Ram. The rear elements of X-Class, but he says it's obvious that by 2030, the Chinese brands are going to have made a major impact into this market. So he sees it, the coming decade as that occurring. It's hard to argue with that. Mark Dunbar says, good stuff, guys. Thank you, Mark. Interested to see what comes out of China next year. We'll be in the market for a dual cab ute 4x4 in early 2021. Any word on when we may see something new from LDV or the Great Wall Cannon? And the next thing we're going to see from LDV, and we've run a story on this, is not a ute, but it's the Deliver 9, which is a large van. So it's this big box on wheels, and that'll launch by the end of this year, we believe. And the Cannon was going to be mid-year, but it'll be by the end of this year as well, is our latest mail. So that whole Chinese brand thing just continues to build. Faudo 13 says the new Great Wall, the Haval H6, could be something to look at if it will be off-road worthy. The looks have changed dramatically inside and out. It was very round, now blocky as hell, Bronco influenced almost. So there's that styling thing. You know, they're starting to take up influences from elsewhere.
I think he's not talking quite about the H6. He's talking about the what's known in China as the Big Dog.
Big Dog.
Yeah,
I think it has those indicators or the running lights that go into the headlights in Bronco fashion. Is that right?
That's the Way version, which is like the luxury spin-off of Haval in China, and it's called Tank 300, and it's got these cool indicators and stuff.
The Tank 300,
But they're basically the same car, and they're kind of, I think dimensionally, they're slightly smaller than a Prado, and it's all sort of off-road focused and has that kind of out there Jeep / Land Rover styling going on. We did think at one point it was going to be a replacement for the Haval H5, but I think it's its own product line.
Okay, well, that's great. We'll have some pics of those for people on YouTube so that they can get an appreciation for what we're talking about. Lofty Visions has actually gone as far as joining a T60 Facebook group to do a bit of research just for the fun of it. And he says some are very happy, some not. Issues include rust, which I thought was really a thing of the past. Like that's a blast from the past. And dodgy multimedia, a few other things. But basically, he says he can't see Toyota and Ford shaking in their boots just yet. You know, that the feedback from the owners of these vehicles would indicate that anyway. But then we got into a pretty strong vein of reluctance based on these vehicles being Chinese. Now, it's not necessarily anything to do with anything except politics. So Tom Inman said, love them, but now nothing from China. Wouldn't do it. Griffo says likes it, says he'd buy one, but it's made in China, so he won't. And Bernie Sutton said not about to send thousands of dollars to China after the Chinese Communist Party's performance. It could be the best thing going, but I won't be buying it. So there's a lot of that. Dave XB, I was just about to buy an LDV T60, and he's presumably trading in his XB Falcon on the T60 if his name is Dave XB. Then the Chinese Communist Party started bullying Australia for simply requesting an independent inquiry into COVID-19. And so there's a big, no, I won't go there. Stephen Davis, I think, could be the 6-time world snooker champion. I'm not sure. Hope so. Forget the Chinese crap, guys. No one is that stupid. His words, not mine. Peter Crott, I'm not ready to buy a Korean car yet, let alone a Chinese one. We started to go down this rabbit hole of reluctance. And then Griffo came back and said, Kia's been on the improve for years. You've got a 7-year warranty. When the market moves to 7, they'll go to 10. You know, how can you argue with that? To which Peter Crott came back and said, he agrees they're well made and reliable. He was just very transparent and said, I just couldn't stand the badge. I don't want a Kia. So he's still got that reluctance. And so that's interesting. Then we moved on to some thoughts on the Mazda 3 Skyactiv X. And Tom, this is your bailiwick, really, because you've been to the launch of that car locally. And G-Man said, hi, Shed of Tools. So hello, G-Man. Mazda 3 Astina Skyactiv X. Why would Mazda go 24-volt mild hybrid when the rest of the civilized world uses 48-volt? And he goes on to compare, you know, cars like the Corolla hybrid as being more genuine in terms of fuel savings. Have you got any mail on that, having attended the launch?
Yeah, I'd say it's a really good question, and there's a lot of really fascinating stuff about this technology that Mazda are, employing. I would say, without knowing, the full inner workings of Mazda, that the 24-volt thing, it's a sort of step in the water, and it's a Mazda, of course, being a brand that is investing so much in R&D at the moment, probably has limited resources and has to pick and choose its battles when it comes to this stuff. So I actually don't think they have a market-ready 48-volt front-wheel driving technology ready to go. We know that they've got a full EV coming in the form of the MX-30. But yeah, this 24-volt system, he's right. It doesn't drive the wheels. It just supports auxiliary systems and importantly, the starter generator and the motor. That's the major one. So it takes that initial stress off. Right. And yeah, he did have another part to the question that I saw, which was, how come it runs on? Oh no, that was another question. How come it runs on 95 in Australia? And that's
TGV, the very fast train. TGV was saying he wants to know if the SCCI 4-cylinder engine needs 95 RON. Has Mazda provided any info if E10 94 RON makes a difference on how the system works? That was the question.
Yeah, okay. So in Australia, can't run on 91 because of the high sulfur content in our base crap grade fuel. But it has to run on 95. Now, is that
the Bowser at the end of the lineup? You go kind of 98, 95, then crap grade is just
crap grade. Yeah. Anyway, the fuel filler said you could put E10 in it. Right. It said E10 compatible.
Okay.
I have actually asked.
I can tell you, Tom, I've driven around Scotland for a few days early last year, and we were allowed to put whatever fuel in it we liked. Obviously, that's European spec fuel, but we were running it on E10 and everything. So over there, you can use whatever you like. And it was, I can report, after 3 days and quite a lot of kilometres, it was very economical.
Well, I mean, TGV makes the point that E10 is basically 1/3 oxygen, which could lift the octane up to something like a 94. And detonation is so crucial in this technology that the octane rating of the fuel you're using does make a difference. Yeah. Or maybe it doesn't, because there's Mazda saying, use what you like.
They said running it on 95 over 91 in our market won't make a noticeable difference, apparently. And so just to jump back to G-Man's question quickly, he is right. If you're looking for like big time fuel savings, you are going to have to look at like a Corolla hybrid or something instead. And he did call out the fact that we got a remarkably low fuel usage number. I got 6.4 litres to 100, which is quite low considering, the 2.5 litre will do 8 point something, in normal real world testing.
Right. Yes.
And he also said that other outlets had gotten wildly different numbers, which is also true. But I mean, all I did was follow the prescribed drive loop, which was just over 100 Ks, and then I put another 100 Ks on it before our video day, which always blows out the fuel number anyway. So the number I recorded before our video day was 6.4. So I mean, and there was a lot of traffic in there, so it wasn't like it was all freeways.
Well, I did about 1,000 kilometers, and I remember that I got between 6.3 and 6.5. I drove two different cars over that time. There was swapping between the cars, and one was a manual, one was an automatic. So.
Right. Well, neither of you are notorious hypermilers. You know, you're not necessarily known for your greasy throttle application.
What is hypermiling?
Oh, well, it's just trying to get the most kilometres out of a drop of dinosaur juice.
Just to round that one up though quickly, I have asked the question about 94. I haven't got an answer yet, so I will find that out in the future.
Good. Okay. Well, maybe we can update next week. Yeah. Very good. Now, we also had some feedback on the Bronco. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for that. Dan White doesn't understand the Bronco hype. He's just not getting it. How many people want to remove the roof and doors? Is his question.
Americans.
Well, that's true. But if he says if it came with a solid front axle or something a bit more hardcore, he could understand it. But he sees it as something similar to the FJ Cruiser, kind of echo of a past model, made modern. But really, if you want to go rock crawling, you're into something like a 76 series Land Cruiser or even a Jimny or a Wrangler. And Hammer Rocks, our old mate Hammer Rocks, came back and said, you're obviously not the target demographic, though I agree with you on the 70 series and Jimny, but wouldn't touch the Wrangler unless I like fixing things on a regular basis, was his commentary on the Wrangler. Then we had a bit of back and forth between Dan White and Hammer Rocks. Dan White, Wrangler good. Hammer Rocks, Wrangler Rubicon bad. So there was a lot of... It would be good to get a bit more feedback on that one. Then Gray Nichols, obviously the heir to the cricket bat fortune, although he spells it differently, which is probably a little bit like Don Bradman's son John moving to the surname Bradson. So it's Gray Nichols, but different spelling. And last week were talking about the suspension on the Bronco and how it was a little bit old-fashioned, being a panhard rod setup. But Gray Nichols says the HQ did, all caps, not have a panhard rod. The live axle was located via 2 outboard lower drag links and 2 diagonal links in the same in the centre above the diff. The Tirana also used this setup. The panhard rod was first used in 78 in the Commodore. Now, TGV, the very fast train, took umbrage with that and said Commodore had the same rear suspension as Kingswood, coil spring live axle located by panhard rod. And Gray Nichols said, can't tell you how many Kingswoods I've been under and never once saw a stock panhard rod. It's a 4-link GM setup. And then TGV, no, it isn't. Gray Nichols, yes, it is. And then Gray Nichols put a link to a site called Chevy DIY, which shows the structure of these different setups. So join in the debate. Is it a panhard rod or isn't it? Let's really get this fight happening. Then we had some more general feedback at the end. Now, Ghulam Dust Gear gave us 4 thumbs up, which is great, which actually is on top of the 14 that he gave us last week. So our Dust Gear thumbs up tally currently sits at 18, which is good, and we'll keep tabs on that.
Tally.
Ian Thomas said, good on you, Crafty. You're a funny man. Good show tools, with 2 thumbs up. So that was very good. Hammer Rocks, Crafty is demand. Crafty for Prime Minister, exclamation point.
Please.
So I don't know where we'd be heading if Crafty was actually controlling things in Canberra. And the final comment is Grained Smile, simply asking, what is this vid? And I think it's a very good question. I think it's probably hard to define, but if he watches a couple more, maybe he'll get an idea. But what we'll move on to now is our main topic of conversation, which is a Stephen Otley story that ran during the week on carsguide.com.au about how the whole idea of the performance SUV is moving from the premium part of the market more into the mainstream, with cars like Volkswagen's Tiguan R, the Hyundai Kona N, Skoda Kodiaq RS. So that whole desire to have your cake and eat it too. I want the practicality of an SUV, but I'd like something with a little bit of engagement in terms of the drive experience, seems to be finding a broader market. Steve, I know in the past you've been reasonably vocal about finding it a bit of a question mark as to why this even exists. Would that be true to say?
Oh, I think I understand why it exists, but I don't like it. And as far as eating your cake and having it too, here's a normal sized cake, and here's an SUV would be a wedding cake with 3 tiers on it. And if you try and drive a wedding cake quickly around a corner, I think the laws of gravity will tell you it's going to fall over. And that's the whole problem.
Very good.
It's all about the center of gravity. And I infamously refused to drive a Cayenne, I think, for about 7 years, but I tried to pretend they didn't exist. I didn't like the idea, so I blame Porsche for everything. But,
right.
Yes, that's my feeling about the cake.
My mate Bram, who is a very, very diehard air-cooled 911 enthusiast, thinks that Porsche actually ceased to exist in 1996 when the 911 went to water cooling. And he has been known to spontaneously flip the bird at Macan and Cayenne drivers in general traffic. So I think that takes it to the nth degree. He blames Porsche for everything as well.
I'm actually surprised that this hasn't happened sooner, this whole filtering down of performance SUVs to, mainstream automakers. Like, it's such a obvious moneymaker, isn't it? Like, you see how many Macans and Cayennes and GLC 63s that they sell. What aren't they missing a trick? Why hasn't this happened sooner?
Yeah. Well,
I agree. Like, high center of gravity in a performance car is silly. It is truly it's such a ridiculous concept. But you know that there's going to be legions of people out there who will buy these things.
Yeah, I agree. And I suppose you don't have that lower center of gravity that you have in a more conventional car. But if you are, for whatever reason, drawn towards an SUV, and yet there's part of you that would like to have a slightly more involving drive experience, there's nothing to say you can't do it. It just doesn't make a lot of technical sense. An engineer would turn around and say to you, why are you doing that? Why are we working on this suspension? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, the person in that situation needs to buy a mirror and have a good hard look at themselves, because you can't have both. You can have one or the other, or you can have both if you buy two cars. Have your family SUV and then get yourself a little MX-5, whatever you can afford. Just get yourself a car that you can actually drive and enjoy.
Well, we're going to have one of the most.
The thing about them is that as annoying as they are, the Macan is actually fantastic to drive.
It's
like
awesome.
They have actually. I hate saying it and I hate driving because it makes me so. It's such a wonderful mix of happy and unhappy at the same time.
Do you know my theory on that is that Porsche, it's almost like they were beta testing their SUVs out in market. They didn't really know why they were doing this. They just knew they had to make some money, sold the first few one, and then now they're getting into their stride. And I think the more recent versions of both Cayenne and Macan are way, way better.
Well, I just had the GTS version of the Macan. You're absolutely right, Stephen. It was just awesome. Like it
feels like a Porsche.
It's silly. Yeah, it's silly.
It shouldn't be that good. It just shouldn't be that good.
It's so heavy, but it's also so fast.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think they've sort of wrapped their head around. No, this isn't a sports car. This is something else. And in typical Porsche Teutonic fashion, they've, with determination, made it work somehow. It's engineering voodoo, but they're terrific. So, I mean, if some of that as well is able to filter down into the volume market, wow, terrific. The Kodiaq RS, Skoda's got a bit of a track record with RS models and making their Octavia RS a bit of a cult car in terms of performance. If they can work a bit of that magic, that'd be a great car too.
Octavia, Golf GTI magic for the things like the Tiguan and so on. You can see them coming up with something quite good as well.
Absolutely. Octavia RS wagon is famously the motoring journalist car, isn't it? It's quite a few own one.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I mean, one of the biggest selling cars in the market, the best selling mid-size SUV anyway, CX-5 Mazda. That's going to have a turbo engine, not necessarily an outright performance car, but it's starting to get a little more underfoot and becoming more dynamic rather than just utilitarian and practical. You think about Hyundai and how they're leveraging the whole N thing, and we're going to have Kona N, Tucson N, Santa Fe N. So they're going quite heavily into it as well. Ford will have the Puma ST and an Endura ST. So the choice will be fairly broad in the not too distant future. The Volkswagen T-Roc R, Tiguan R, so not just a GTI, but going straight to a slightly more hardcore version of those vehicles as well. And you'd have to think, given their track record, that last time, with the Duke, Nissan was mucking around with Nismo versions, which were largely cosmetic. But this time, I'm sure we'll see a Nismo version of that, maybe in the fullness of time, once you pass the first flush of that model arriving in market. So there's going to be quite a lot of it.
It makes sense of whatever people drive, and that's what everyone drives now is an SUV. Whatever people drive, there's going to be people who want a sportier version.
Yes.
And Australians particularly love them. Look how much AMG badging we go for. We love the sportier stuff. So if there's an option there, people will buy it. So it seems crazy to say, Tom, that these car companies haven't jumped on this before. I'd be all over it if I was in planning. And just quickly about the Porsche engineers and the voodoo. I think it behoves the world to ask Porsche to fix cancer because they could pretty much do anything.
That's true. Hey, that's a great idea. That is a great idea.
Or solve COVID.
think about how quickly Formula One teams, even Australian supercar teams, were on to making ventilators, portable ventilators. They were able to turn their skills to that very, very rapidly. That's interesting. I agree. And you think about Nismo, you think about N, you think about R, all these letters that just are AMG. You mentioned AMG, Steve. I think, in Australia, in terms of the number of AMGs sold in this market relative to the number of Mercedes-Benzes, it's the biggest piece of that pie in any market in the world. Australians just love their performance cars. So you're right, Tom. It's a very logical thing that probably should have happened some time ago.
Yes, I look forward to hating the experience of driving all of them.
All right, it'd be great to get people's feedback too, who are listening or viewing this. Where do you stand on this? Are you in the market for these things? It may not be possible to do the both thing very, very soon, Steve. Buy a car, buy the SUV. It's rapidly becoming the case that all you can buy is SUVs. There aren't that many cars kind of left in the market. SUV now counts for more than 50% of all vehicles sold. So once you count in utes and commercial vehicles and what have you, the piece of the pie that is conventional cars is getting so small.
Oh, I know. I went to an Audi A4 and A5 launch this week, and I was genuinely surprised they were still bothering. But they make up about 40% of their sales, and 40% they said is still a reasonable number.
Yes. Well, it is.
Sedans and non-SUVs are 40%. That's still a bit, but it's almost alarming how high the number is.
It's true. All right. Well, look, it'd be great to get people's feedback, their thoughts on this migration of the whole concept of a performance SUV into the mainstream market. But we'll move to our garage and the cars that we've been driving this week. And Steve, can I kick it off with you? You have been in a Range Rover Sport, but a particular variety of that vehicle.
Yeah, speaking of performance SUVs, the Range Rover Sport's one that's always confused me the most because it's just so massive. And you're literally, I reckon you're sitting in that car, you're sitting on the roof of any normal car. But I've got a plug-in hybrid version, so speaking of making no sense at all. But I'm trying to embrace the future, so I thought I would go and plug it in to see if it actually made a difference. So I felt a green glow of satisfaction as I sat at the tram sheds near my house, a local shopping centre, for an hour, and then came out to the car, giggling to myself, look I've done, taking photos, and plugged it in, turned it on, and hadn't charged at all. Not one volt, not 1 ampere, complete fail. And I was like, well, I just imagine going to the fuel station, standing there and just coming away with nothing. The car just rolling to a stop and going, well, that's not gone well. So as we speak, I've got a cable coming over my front fence and I'm trying to find an extension cord long enough to charge it.
And what kind of charge level were you on before you went to charge it up? Were you completely drained or still had some capacity in there?
It was brought to me by a colleague who said that he brought it here completely flat and said, you'll need to charge it. Thanks very much. And he said, I think it makes a difference. He said, it makes a distinct difference to the way it drives when you've got some electric charge. So you have to go and charge it. So he's helpfully brought it to me empty. It's a famous motoring journalist tradition to drop off a car at someone else's house with nothing in it. And said, you'll have to sort this out. Good luck.
Yes. Oh, brilliant.
Thanks,
so
Toby
then you've got it charging. So have you had much of an opportunity to steer it so far?
So I've only driven it without this extra charge, and it is typical Range Rover Sport. It's like driving a jumbo jet. It's just like where I live, there's no room for it anywhere. I can't reach the start button. They put the windows up in the wrong spot. Everything about it. It's hard to think of a car that's less me, I think. Right. But I love the look of it. God, it's fantastic, and it
does look good.
It does look good. I could just sit in it and not go anywhere. I think I'd be quite happy.
I mean, Jerry McGovern at Land Rover is someone who is consistently delivering fantastic looking vehicles. It's always subjective, of course, but to my eyes, pretty much everything in the Land Rover, Range Rover world is appealing. Although
it's amazing.
Well, see, Matt Campbell, if he were here, he would shout you down. He'd be howling you down because, he sees it as way too smooth and soft and sleek, whereas he sees an SUV come four-wheel drive should have an element of not quite aggression, but be a little more masculine, be a bit tougher. And
a bit Cybertruck?
No, maybe not quite as far as Cybertruck, but he's seeing it as too smooth and too glassy and glossy and sleek. He wants it to have a little more personality.
Yeah, I think
it's a Range Rover.
I think they're reflecting their buyer now, like they're so city bound, and that's more, to the taste of, city slicking buyers. Whereas, I was a huge fan of the first Range Rover Sport because it wasn't like any other SUV on the market. It was still kind of like angular and rugged, and there was some really sort of tough bits to it, and I missed that about it.
It was like a punch in the face, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But then the Evoque changed everything. Because that was a car that arrived as a concept, and if you're to believe what we're told, pretty much that was just as a concept. Like we probably won't end up building that, but Jerry McGovern was able to lobby and get it through virtually unscathed, and it made it to market looking just like that, and it changed the look of Land Rovers and Range Rovers from there on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really hard to make an SUV look good, and that's why he's a genius. Like it's very difficult, But I can't but help but like the look of them. And I think the Velar just gives you an option. If you want a rugged square one, you can still have one. Yep. If you want, I think it's a Velar's the sort of person who would have bought a Jaguar, but now they have to have an SUV.
Yes, good point.
Well, I really like the base model one with the tiny little wheels on it. It looks a bit more, tough, bit more Range Rover,
Mm. In the Velar, Tom.
Yeah, in the Velar. Yeah, right. Just an absolute base model, smallest possible wheels.
Right.
Yeah, that's the one I want.
Now. Staying on the subject of SUVs and also ones that you can plug into an electric socket, Tom, tell us what you've been driving.
So I've had the Mercedes-Benz GLC 300E, which is a paragraph in and of itself, but that is Mercedes-Benz's midsizer, and this is the plug-in hybrid electric one, just like the Range Rover that Stephen's been driving. And so I have the same problem, though. I have nowhere to charge it at home. And but my car did arrive to me with some charge. So it had about 80%. And for the first sort of day and a half where I was driving it and making the most of it, I had about 38 Ks range out of 48, I think, is its max charge.
Yep.
And those first days of driving it, it just changed my mind about it altogether. I think the GLC should be an electric car now because it's so much better in electric mode. It's silent and it's like you're floating on a cloud through, and no one can hear you, and you can't hear anyone, and you're just sort of, wafting through towns and stuff. And the suspension, because the special thing about that car is you can buy the regular GLC 300, or you can buy this car for a few grand more, but it includes the air suspension package, which costs the same as the difference. So you're basically getting a plug-in hybrid for free. And you get the air suspension package, so it's amazing. It's just like nothing bothers this thing on the road. And to me, that's going back to performance SUVs, that's what SUVs should be about. They should be comfortable. They shouldn't be about bashing around and throwing it into corners and stuff. They should be about just wafting through towns and not being bothered by speed bumps and potholes and whatnot.
That would be a particular approach to the SUV, Tom. There are some others that may have a different purpose in mind.
Well, anyway, to me, that's what
I think you'd like the Rolls Royce very much and the Bentayga. They're both good.
Exactly.
That's your kind of SUV.
Well, anyway, but I thought it suited, the design of this car as well. Like, you sit in a GLC and it's kind of got that kind of a little bit more old world Mercedes-Benz design. There's less of the flashy stuff that you see in the smaller cars. And so it sort of suits that kind of like opulent interior treatment. But, yeah, it was interesting because once I'd run out of charge, I'd started using the petrol engine. And for the first 2 or 3 days after that, I got quite annoyed because it wasn't as good as the electric mode. So what I'd started doing is sticking it in sport mode, and that stops the engine from turning off. And the advantage of that is the engine starts charging the battery. So I would drive it around in sports mode for 2 days so I could drive it around.
To charge battery.
Well, I mean, I totally take your point about air suspension. A well-engineered air suspension system is a thing of beauty. The way in which they can iron out even a corrugated surface is quite extraordinary. So I hear you loud and clear on that. And it's really interesting that you see it as a better vehicle in electric mode. That's very telling.
Now, I've got a question for Mr. Corby, though. Does your Range Rover have a public charging cable, like a Type 2 to a Type 2, so you can charge it like a shopping centre or something?
It did have, I plugged it in. I think where it could have gone wrong is that I plugged it into a Tesla charger. Now, the thing is, you can steal power from Tesla chargers, and we did it recently at the racetrack at Eastern Creek. But I think there's a switch. I think there's a switch that the provider can turn, which stops that happening.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I've got the cable plugged in at the moment, coming over my fence, but I just use the public charger into the front. I haven't got all the way to the house yet. Look, let's not do one step at a time.
You've got both cables then. You've got the one that goes Type 2 to Type 2, and then you've got the one that goes to a wall socket. Because in the GLC, the Type 2 to Type 2, the public charging cable is a $540-something option. So it didn't come with my car, so I couldn't charge it at my local shops, which has just put a brand new charger system in. Yeah.
Wow.
Which was very upsetting.
So the cable you've got going over the fence, Steve, that's not into your neighbour's charger. That's somewhere out to the car.
My house.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It's going to my house eventually.
All right.
God willing. Bunnings willing. I will find a cable long enough.
But I mean, these are terrific examples of real-world issues that are, at the moment, still a limitation in terms of EV ownership. For a lot of people.
Garage. Look at your house, James. If I had a garage, everything would be fine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, councils, local governments, state, federal, are thinking about infrastructure, some more than others, but how to, when you're in a street, houses don't have garage, you're parking on the street, how do you make some little outlet that attaches itself to the gutter or somehow the edge of the footpath that's able to be accessed in a secure way? It's a bit of a head scratcher at the moment, but people are working on it.
It's an interesting one, I think, for Sydney particularly, because in a lot of those wealthier suburbs where you've got people who might actually take the dive on a luxury electric car like that, Paddington, like suburbs like Enmore, like suburbs like that where people, there's nowhere to charge. Like, how can you don't have a garage?
Well, I mean, Steve's a Balmain basket.
Balmain,
he's in exactly the same situation.
Basket week. I can tell you, without exaggeration, I have seen three new Teslas within 2 blocks of my street in the last week, and in the last month, probably between 6 and 9. They are buying Teslas around here, like we believe, because they've got stupid amounts of money. But if you look up, there is nowhere in the whole suburb to charge.
Wow,
I see. One charging point. I have to go to Glebe to the tram sheds, which is the one I tried, or you can go to Birkenhead Point, which is
right. So you've got to go over the bridge.
Hell on earth. Yeah.
It's
It's got the worst car park in the known universe. You can be in there for days. Yeah. At least you'd have time to charge your car. But the fact that all these people are buying them, yet no one's done anything. It's a basket weaver council. They've done nothing about providing charging points anywhere. Like put some outside the town hall, put one in the Woolies car park. I mean, you go to America, you pull in for a burger. There's one in the car park at the burger place. You're only going to be in there for 3 hours eating, and you can still charge a car.
Charge a car. I suppose it could be a case where demand just forces some kind of change as opposed to a preemptive strike on the part of councils. Their hand may be forced over time.
Yeah, well, that's right. They've just put in this massive new car park and shopping complex near me, and that has if you go down a few levels in the car park, it's got an entire section for car charging, and there's Tesla and public charging. So
there are some at Broadway, I think, as well. Broadway has them. There's a side area there. But the thing is about these Teslas, I see them because each one of those Teslas I mentioned is parked in the street out front of a house. Or they've got a driveway, but none of them have garage. So I actually may go and knock on their doors and saying, "How are you charging these?"
Yes, yeah.
I'm very curious. I've seen them plugged in.
It would be an interesting and quite creepy exercise to actually do that.
To have me turn up on your door and ask strange questions about your power source.
Just while we're on, I know we probably have to move on quickly, but just while we're on the topic of these, I do have to bring up the fuel number that I ended up with, because I have just returned the GLC, and the fuel number that I ended up with was really interesting. I think it's a cautionary tale. It'll be in the review. And there's a whole lot of extra weight in a plug-in hybrid. So the GLC's other power source is a 2-liter turbo engine with healthy power figures, but it has to drag around all this extra weight of this battery system and the charging infrastructure and whatever that's inside the car. So the fuel figure, even though I had drove it around for 2 days on all electric mode, the fuel figure I ended up with after a week was 10 liters to 100, which still isn't great. And their lab reported figure is 2 point something.
Well, see, I think the trick there, Tom, is that's for 100 kilometres. So that figure is calculated over 100 kilometres. So what you've got for that 100 is a fully charged system. The next 100, that may not be the case. In the real world, you're probably going to drive it on the petrol engine for a certain period of time. So it's an even more artificial figure than some others may be with plug-in hybrids. It's something to be aware of.
Absolutely.
I did hear a rumor that the guy driving it was zooting around in sports mode.
That's true.
So that he could charge the battery, which is clearly problem.
It's clearly a strategy that doesn't work.
No.
But I think the interesting thing is if you are considering a plug-in, you have to have somewhere to charge it if you're going to make the most of it. So that's just worth thinking
what's
about.
The point?
Yeah. Well, otherwise you're going to be dragging around a lithium-ion battery, and your poor petrol engine's going to be trying harder to do it. So you're going to end up with a worse fuel figure anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've been driving a car where the only battery is next to the engine up the front and probably in the key fob flipper when you're locking the car or opening the tailgate. It's an RSQ3, the wagon version, as opposed to the slightly sleeker Sportback. It's just under $90,000 before you put it on the road. 2.5-litre turbo 5-cylinder petrol engine. 7-speed dual clutch auto, all-wheel drive, just under 300 kilowatts, which isn't too bad. 480 newton meters, and all of that is available from just under 2,000 RPM. It weighs about 1.8 tons, and in the plus column, I had that it is punchy. It's really fast. It is pretty fast car. Very good quality in current Audi fashion. The electric steering surprisingly good, and it's well equipped. You've got everything from AEB to this fancy Napa leather with the red cross stitching, and it's a beautiful environment to be in. On the not so good side, I had that you get quite a lot of rollback with the dual clutch when you're trying to start off, be it in reverse or whatever. Just to manage that takes a little bit of getting used to. It can be a little bit clunky when you're in parking manoeuvres, that dual clutch as well. It's quite firm in terms of its ride, and so the refinement is a question you'd have to ask yourself before opting in for a car like that, because it is a performance SUV. So you gain something and you possibly lose on the other side in terms of that refinement factor. But it was a fun week in that car because it is a quick little SUV. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to move on now to MuskWatch. And we can kick it off with a provocative tweet. Of course, the dear leader was on the Twitters this week, and he simply said aliens built the pyramids, obviously. So he was wanting to capture a particular response, and the crazies came out right on cue. And J. Laws said, men may have built them, but they are far too grand for tombs. You know yourself, it's some kind of power plant harnessing the Earth's magnetic field. I think it was Tesla who stood on top with a light bulb that illuminated. Please figure this out for humanity. So all I'm thinking is if it's a power source and a person stood on the top and all they could light up was a light bulb, even if that did happen, I don't think it's very efficient.
Yeah, it's a poor kilowatt hour per kilometre sort of rating, isn't it?
I think
there is the point that they are tombs as well, because there are bodies inside. Anyway,
too true.
Don't argue.
Hagrid said, "Dear Elon, I agree with you completely. I always thought the same, and everybody told me I'm crazy." So he's found a kindred spirit. Then there was another person who claims that in the Istanbul Museum, there's a sculpture of a headless astronaut in a spacesuit sitting into inside a rocket ship covered in tubes. And there's a picture of that for people who want to have a look at it on YouTube. So, yeah, the crazies came out. But he hooked a big fish with one of Egypt's top archaeologists, Zahi Hawass, who, in response, unleashed on Instagram, because it's a very touchy subject for Egyptians. The pyramids, of course, they're very proud of this. one of the wonders of the ancient world, these ancient structures. And he was keen to put Elon back in his place and say, what you said about the pyramids is complete hallucinations. You are basically off your trolley. The pyramids were built by Egyptians, and he went at great lengths to prove that was the case. But I think Elon got the intended result there by putting that tweet out.
I gotta say though, I agree there. I don't like this idea of celebrities sharing conspiracy theories and normalizing them into popular culture. It's just a bad, this is one of the least dangerous ones. The whole, pyramids built by aliens. That's, whatever.
I mean, he was joking. He was putting it out there to try and get these people to come out of the shadows, and he succeeded.
Oh, you and I know that.
Yeah. There's a lot of idiots out there. I can just say that I've been to the pyramids. I have two things about the pyramids. Don't drive in Cairo. It's the worst driving I've ever seen. We were in the car for about 2 minutes. I said, I think we're going to have an accident. And sure enough, the van we were in got slammed into. We were in an accident. And then I got to the pyramids eventually, and each one of the blocks in the Great Pyramid is the size and weight of a Land Cruiser. And when you see them close up, it is, and you look at them and you do the maths in your head, you just cannot work out how humans did it.
Extraordinary.
And that's why all these crazy things come from. But yes, the aliens, probably not. But I'm a big fan of Eric von Daniken. Just Google his work.
The Chariots of the
He's
Gods.
all about the
Chariots of the Gods.
What a book that was.
Yes. It was very thought-provoking and provocative at the time. But that's a very interesting subject too, the worst city to drive in. I think that would be a really good topic for the podcast. I'd have to throw out there Crete. I've driven on Crete. That was absolutely terrifying. And that was in a Seat Ibiza, which was at that stage a little two-stroke jobby. So there was all things conspiring against a relaxed drive there. And I think Bangkok as well is pretty horrendous. I remember sitting in a hotel watching it across the intersection, and the one side of the road filled up with traffic, so everyone just gridded up on the other side. So when the lights were going to change, there was this mad screaming dash to get back to the right side of the road. As the lights changed, it was absolutely horrendous. So to hear people's thoughts on the worst city, that would be quite good.
It'd be a good feedback section next week.
Oh yeah.
But I'm anywhere in India. Chester and I went on a launch there, and we got stuck at an intersection where there were cows, people, and then we realised that no one was giving way, and India just had to go. So we were like, I just closed my eyes, and we both went now, and just had to dive across the intersection. It was absolutely terrifying. We saw a cow coming the wrong way down a freeway.
You do not want to damage or hurt that cow.
Don't damage the cow. No.
You can't. Sacred.
Don't have a cow, man. No.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the other interesting thing in the Dear Leaders world this week was that he took part in a long-form interview with Maureen Dowd from the New York Times. And she was able to extract information from him on a whole bunch of stuff about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, Grimes and Parenthood and Trump, and that's Ivanka and Donald, and politics in general, his time at Tesla, SpaceX, what it's like in Silicon Valley, Zuckerberg, Bezos, Buffett, all these other kind of billionaires that are out there, and his behaviour on Twitter. But I think at the end, the most telling thing was she conducted a quick confirm or deny. Here's 20 questions, confirm it or deny it. Really interesting device. And one of them that stood out for me was Gandalf the Grey was cooler than Gandalf the White. Okay, confirm or deny. Just didn't get a yes or no. It got, that's a tough one. I think in some ways he was cooler, but he kind of needed to defeat the Balrog in order to become a better wizard, I guess, and play the bigger role in defeating Sauron. But he was definitely more chill as Gandalf the Grey and had a better sense of humour. That is the real Elon Musk. That's
nerd.
That is the shock and awe nerd that resides behind the Tony Stark facade. The other thing is that I wasn't aware of that Tesla, and Elon's a high-profile part of this, is suing Rivian. So electronic truck maker and SUV, soon to be hitting the market. And Automotive News on the Daily Drive podcast, publisher Jason Stein, in a one-on-one with Elon, had some questions for him and said, look, Rivian is allegedly poaching Tesla employees. That was the allegation that was put to him. And he said, I mean, it's not like a massive percentage, but they've definitely taken a bunch of Tesla intellectual property. He's got proof, he believes, of people walking out of the place with stuff on thumb drives, including there are 4 employees that are included in the action. And they've stolen stuff to Rivian's exact requirements. This is what we want you to take with you before you exit the building and come and join us, is the allegation. So they're poaching, but not only that, this is the stuff we want you to bring with you, is what is being claimed. 4 former employees, including a staff recruiter, claim to have downloaded documents outlining the candidate pipeline. So all the people that they've been talking to about positions at Tesla, their qualifications, their background, how they rate, that's one of the things that has allegedly been taken to Rivian. Also stuff on charging networks and a whole swathe of other things. And CNN, in response, Rivian, according to CNN Business, Rivian says the suit's allegations are baseless. But an interesting stat is that Rivian has hired 178 Tesla employees in the last little while since its inception. So you'd have to think they're on a bit of a mission to maybe catch a hint here or there in terms of what Tesla's up to. So I thought that was quite interesting.
If you're setting up an EV company, who would you be looking to poach?
Oh, exactly. And there's
only one out there. Like, you got to take experienced employees from somewhere, right? Like,
but I mean, as far as Elon's concerned, they're all violating their confidentiality agreements and non-solicit agreements that they've signed, according to him. Mm-hmm. So they've taken IP, they've started to talk to others, come and join us. And so he said, look, they were doing bad things and we've sued them. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
I would predict Rivian will be broke quite soon and Elon's lawyers will be rich.
Look, it'll be interesting. We'll keep an eye on it. Tesla share price, $1,489. And last week it was $1,487. So we've got a new sense of stability in the Tesla share price. The high of the week was on Monday at 1,515. So it's all around the same little band. But Business Insider Australia says that Chinese electric manufacturer NIO, and we know a little bit about NIO, has become the darling of the share market. And it was seen a huge surge in popularity on trading platform eToro, displacing Tesla as the number 1 pick amongst Australians. So there's a lot of action there. And when you think that in 2010, Tesla was $19.20 a share, and we're now at nearly 1,500, people are looking for the next big thing. So the trade on that share has increased 6-fold in the last month. And the share price has quintupled, or the Tesla share price, what am I saying here? Tesla? No, I think it's NIO's share price has quintupled since May and doubled over the last 5 weeks. So people are jumping on.
If there's another place to be looking at for that electric car development, you see Tesla as being one of them, and then Rivian having to steal their employees. But in China, due to the regulations there, electric cars are big time. Like every manufacturer needs to have electric cars in China. And so I was actually chatting to Great Wall's representative in Australia last week, and he was telling me that they've got some really, really cool stuff being worked on at Great Wall's electric division called Aura, and they have a spin-off company that develops their battery technology that is currently working on removing cobalt from lithium-ion batteries. And that's a big deal because cobalt, not only is it extremely expensive, one of the most expensive things in a lithium-ion battery, but it comes from really dodgily sourced places.
Questionable sources, yes. Yeah. Well, that's a breakthrough. That is a definite breakthrough.
So they have actually developed a battery that does remove cobalt, and the latest news is a big European manufacturer has put in a massive purchase order for them. So,
well, I suppose it's all about efficiency, isn't it? Because you can remove cobalt, but presumably it's there for a reason, and makes the batteries perform better. I can make a battery out of a lemon. But it won't drive a car. So that if they are able to do that, very telling. But okay, guys, I think with that we have reached the finish line, and I want to say thank you, Steve, and thank you, Tom, and thanks to our production ringmaster, second-tier staff surgeon, and pet exorcist, Mr. Pritchard, for his incredible work behind the scenes. Today he's wearing a T-shirt saying "Pants are bullshit," and no pants, and chrome shoes, something to see, the reflection, given the no pants scenario. Please pass on the word about the podcast and let us know your thoughts by searching for CarsGuide on Facebook and Instagram using the hashtag CGPodcast, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, please rate and review us. And remember, you can watch us on YouTube. But before we go, talking to old mate at the servo, and he said to me that COVID-19 in Australia reminded him of the Spice Girls. Everyone's doing their best except Victoria.
That's good. Not bad.
Thanks, Hammer. Thanks, Hammer.
Yeah.